all these fields that have been newly set were about, well, this one here was about four feet underwater, and I know that because just there, about just there, is where I dropped my drone into it for 6 days. Hello and welcome to Scott Tilley Photography for this week's video. I hope you're well and you're staying safe. I'm actually, I was working early shift today, so 7 till 1. So Leia took the dog out this morning, and which means I'm now out on my afternoon walk. I'm actually a little bit earlier than I wanted to be. It's still the sun's still quite high in the sky. But after having a few requests for some more wildlife, obviously the problem you've got at the minute is you can't travel anywhere to take images of wildlife. So the wildlife that you're going to get images of is basically the stuff that you've got around where you live. Now, for me, one of the requests I've had, and one of the animals that I do get quite a lot of, is brown hare. So that's what we're going to do. I'm going to have to see if I can find some hares. I have seen, when I've been walking the dog in the mornings a couple of times, I've seen one or two in a certain field. So that's where I'm going to head to, and hopefully we'll get some images. So yes, I shall see you in a bit, and we'll see if we can find a few brown hares. I've made my way up to this top field, and this is really the only one that wasn't affected by flooding, apart from right in the far corner. And the crop, it's about 3 or 4 inches high in here, and I have seen hares in here over the last few days. I can't see any at the minute. Now, I know I've mentioned in one or two of my other videos, I've done a couple of videos on sort of starting out in wildlife photography and how to get started, and I can't stress enough the importance of working your local patch. Now, this goes for me for hares as well as anything else, to be honest. If you think about it, the skills that you use in your local area can be transferred to somewhere else. So if you're travelling, you know, to another part of the country or even another part of the world, and you want to do some wildlife photography, the animals, although they'll be different, they'll be the same sort of species. So you know things like foxes. There's different types of foxes and sort of dog type creatures in other parts of the world that you know, their behaviour is going to be similar. So you can transfer any skills that you learn in your local area to when you move somewhere else. Right, so with hares, now what I will often do is when I'm walking the dog in the morning, I'll often bring a little pair of binoculars with me. What you're actually looking for is sometimes you'll see a hare running through a field, but more often than not, all you really see is the tips of some ears. Now, you know, obviously in these completely green fields, anything like that you see is going to be difficult unless you've got either binoculars or a big camera lens with you. So I tend to, if I'm walking the dog, I'll tend to take a little pair of binoculars with me, and then I can just spot if there are hares in a field. Now, what I've done in the past is I'll continue with my walk with the dog, drop her back home, and then I'd be straight back out and taking some images. Obviously at the minute we can't do that because we're only allowed out once a day for one walk, so you wouldn't be able to do that, and the chances are if you saw some hares, you know, in the evening, by the following day in the morning they'll have moved off somewhere else. So that makes it quite difficult. But that's the technique that I would use, is when you go out and do any sort of walk in the countryside, just, you know, keep your eye out for things, signs, field signs, the actual animals themselves. Now, so as I said, I've seen hares in this field over the last few days. Now, the other thing to look for when you're looking for hares, and I'll just turn you around and show you this. Right, one of the important things that you can look for when you're looking for brown hares to take images of is actually these lines in the crops. Now, these are where obviously the farmers, when he set the field, he's not put any seed down, and they also use these when they're going to do any spraying of the crops, so they remain sort of brown with no crops on them. And you'll find that the hares are quite often like to lie down along these tracks. Now, the good thing about them is most of them, I mean, this is probably not a brilliant example because it does curve round, but you can find quite a lot of them if you're walking on a path on the edge of the field. When you get parallel with these, they'll run parallel, you know, with the path, so at 45 degrees to the path, and you can often look all the way up to from one end of the field to the other. Now, if hares, as I say, like to lie in these like little depressions between the crops, if you've got either a pair of binoculars or just your long camera lens, and just to scan down each one, they'll obviously come in pairs where the tractor's tyres are. You'll often see that there's a hare laid down along the track somewhere, and obviously because this is bare earth, you know, there's no problem with crawling along it to try and get an image of that hare. Also, I mean, hares do like to use these as trackways, so often what I'll do, if I see that I'm walking at sort of one end of the field and I see there's somebody walking on a track at the other end of the field, you can often anticipate that a hare, if it's disturbed at that end of the field, is going to run down one of these trackways towards you. So you can even sort of anticipate and get laid down ready. You know, you might see a hare take off about a quarter of a mile away down the other side of the field, and you know it's going to come down one of these tracks towards you, so you can just get down and wait for that hare to come into view. And obviously because you're laid down, it will run right towards you, and often they only peel off, say, I don't know, 10, 20 feet away from you. They'll suddenly stop, stand up on the hind legs, and then decide, oh, I don't like the look of that, and then they'll run off in the opposite direction. So yeah, that's a tip that I would give you, is just never discount these little tracks in between. They're often a good place to look for brown hares. Right, I suppose what you also need to know is what to do if you do spot a hare. Now, you know, it's probably going to be 100 meters away from you, and it will have probably spotted you anyway. Hares, what I find with them, if you tried to walk across the field, stood up towards that hare, you would get probably within about 30 meters and then it would be up and running. Now what I find is, and you'll have to work this out for yourself, and every hare, you know, is similar but slightly different. They've all seem to have a different tolerance of how close they'll let you get. So sometimes you can get quite close by sort of stooping down and making yourself smaller, and then say when you get to about 30-40 meters away, you're going to have to get down, right down on the floor and crawl. And what I tend to do when I'm doing that is, if I'm crawling towards a hare, I'll do what I'll sort of get some bank images, some images in the bank. So they might not be exactly what I want, you know, they might not be as close as I want to get, but with a little bit of cropping I've got a reasonable image. So I'll crawl, say, 5 meters at a time or 3 meters at a time, and then I'll stop. And you can get reasonably close. You know, I've been 4 meters away, 3 meters away from a hare before. The problem you've got is the hare, obviously 99 times out of 100 knows you're there. So what the hare is going to do is just going to flatten down to the floor. Now at some point you're going to have to say, right, I'm where I want to be, and you're going to have to wait, because what will happen, the longer you wait, eventually that hare will start to get comfortable, and it'll start to do what hares do naturally. It'll start to stretch, it'll start to yawn, it'll start to eat a little bit of food, you know, and it might interact with other hares that run towards it. So all that can happen, but it's not going to happen straight away. You know, if you've just crawled up to it, it knows you're there, but it doesn't perceive you as a big threat because you laid on the floor rather than stood up. It knows that, you know, if you try and make a move for it, it can be gone like that. You're not going to get anywhere near it. So the thing is, it's how long can you wait, and that generally will influence the quality of your image. Now today, because we're in lockdown, I'm not going to spend a lot of time, you know, I'm not going to lie there for 3 hours. I may do that, you know, in normal circumstances. If I've got a hare in front of me, the shot's there, I've just got to be patient and wait for it, and you know, you're going to have to do the same. So anyway, that's what I'm going to try and do today. I'm going to try and get reasonably close to a hare, take some images. As I say, I probably won't get any behavioural images because I'm not going to be hanging around for too long. And then the trick for me is always to try and crawl backwards and leave the hare where it was, rather than just standing up and letting it run away. I always try and leave it where it is if I can. Right, I hope you've enjoyed this video. I'm sorry it's probably not had as much footage as I wanted to get in it for this video, and I think probably what that's going to mean is that in the future I'll do another video looking a little bit more in depth at taking images of hares, and specifically probably when around mating time when you've got quite a few of them running around, because that can make it easier to get not only stills but also film, which is what I was hoping to do for this video. But unfortunately, with the current lockdown, obviously I've been limited to taking images sort of within a mile or so of my house, and as I said earlier in this video, it's been really badly affected by flooding, so there's not too many hares around. So yeah, I think there's probably going to be a follow-up video to this. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed what I've managed to do, and I hope you've enjoyed some of the images. If you have, give the video a thumbs up, and if you've not yet subscribed to the channel, then please subscribe, and I will see you fairly shortly for another one. Cheers, stay safe, bye.